Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at fodder production in eastern India. We've got a really cool article from AgroScience today, and whether you're interested in sustainable agriculture or just learning new things, this deep dive is for you.
It's a great topic.
Yeah, and you might be surprised how important it is. One thing that really caught my eye in the article, right away, was this fact. India has the most cattle in the world, but they don't produce that much milk per animal.
Yeah, that's right. And the article says one of the biggest reasons is they don't have enough good food.
Ah, interesting.
Fodder is really important for dairy farming. It's not just about how much milk they make, but how good it is, too.
So it's more than just keeping the cows full.
Right.
The article talks about how providing enough good fodder could actually make dairy farming cheaper. Why is that?
Well, if they have enough fodder, they don't have to buy as much of the expensive feeds.
Okay,
And that could even lead to cheaper milk for everyone.
that makes sense. The article also mentions that green fodder isn't just filler food. It's actually got tons of protein, carbs, all that good stuff.
And the different types of fodder do different things.
Oh, okay.
Like legumes have a lot of protein and cereals give them energy. Farmers have to be pretty strategic about what they plant.
So there's a lot of thought that goes into feeding cows, huh?
Definitely.
The article says that India is only using about 5% of its land to grow fodder, and it's been that way for a long time.
That's right. It's a little concerning because they need so much milk in India. You'd think they'd grow more. This lack of fodder impacts everything.
Wow, so like a domino effect.
Yeah, exactly.
On top of all that, there are these threats to fodder production. Like there's less land available, and climate change is making things harder.
It's true. Those are some big challenges. With more people in the world, cities are getting bigger and taking up more land.
Yeah.
And climate change is making it harder to grow anything.
So it's a tough situation. But the article does talk about some potential solutions. One that stood out to me was the year-round fodder production model. What is that?
YRFP, yeah. It's basically about making sure there's always fodder, even when it's hard to grow.
Okay.
So instead of just growing one or two main crops, they use a mix of different ones, so they always have something.
So there's never a time when the fields are just empty.
Exactly.
That's smart. The article gives some examples of this model in action. They're even using ancient grains like diosinte.
Oh, yeah. It's really cool. Farmers are combining old knowledge with new ideas to make things work. The YRFP model also uses those times between the main harvests to grow stuff that grows quickly.
Ah, so no time wasted. What kind of crops are we talking about?
Well, one example is Denaneth grass. It grows really fast and you can harvest it a bunch of times, so it's perfect for those gaps in the schedule.
That's pretty impressive. But what about places where there's not a lot of water?
That's when things get interesting. The article says they're looking at using things like edible cactus as fodder.
Wait, cactus for cows.
I know, right? But cactus is super tough. It can grow in those really dry places where other stuff can't, and it still has water and nutrients.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so we've got these different ways of growing fodder, even using things like cactus. What about technology? Is there anything new that could help?
Definitely. Technology is becoming a bigger part of things. Like precision agriculture can help farmers use water and fertilizer better so they get the most out of their crops.
It sounds like they're using data to farm smarter.
Exactly. Plus, scientists are making new types of fodder crops all the time that are better in different ways, tougher or more nutritious.
It's like they're always trying to make the perfect fodder. It seems like the future of fodder production is going to be a mix of old and new. But before we get into all that, let's talk about the challenges a little more. What are some of the things that are making fodder production harder in eastern India?
Well, we've already talked about some of them. The biggest ones are that there's just not enough land, and climate change is making things unpredictable. But we also have to think about how we balance growing fodder with growing other crops, food for people.
Yeah, it's all connected.
Right. It's a tough question. How do we make sure everyone has enough food while taking care of the environment?
It is a tough question.
But there's a lot of potential for fodder production in eastern India. They have lots of different climates, which means they can grow a lot of different things.
So it's about finding the right crops for each place and then using everything we know to grow them well.
Yeah, and working together, scientists, farmers, the government all have to work together to find solutions.
We're all in this together, and we have to make sure everyone has enough food.
Absolutely. And we also can't forget about the economic side of things. More fodder means more jobs and more money for the region.
It's about feeding families, not just cows. It's about making things better for everyone. We've covered a lot already, so why don't we take a break here and come back to talk about some of the solutions they're trying out in part 2.
Sounds good. Welcome back. We're talking about fodder production in eastern India and some of the really interesting ways they're trying to solve the challenges.
Yeah, last time we were talking about the potential of fodder in the region and all the cool stuff they're doing.
Right, and the article highlights some great examples, like the year-round fodder production model.
The YRFP, yeah. They actually give some real-world examples, like farmers are using maize and cowpea together during the rainy season.
Right, and then in the winter, they switch to teosinte, which is this ancient grain, and rice bean for protein.
So they're always growing something different depending on the time of year.
Yeah, and it's not just random, they're choosing crops that work well together.
Makes sense.
And by rotating like this, they can get more fodder and it's better for the soil.
That's great.
It really is.
But what about those times when the main crops aren't growing? Like, can they still use the fields for something?
Oh, yeah, definitely. That's a big part of the YRFP model. They plant these fast-growing crops in between the main harvests.
Ah, smart.
So they're always growing something. Like one they use is Jananeth grass.
Oh, yeah.
It grows super fast and you can harvest it over and over again.
Wow.
So it's perfect for those times when the fields would normally be empty.
They're really using every chance they get.
Yeah.
The article also mentioned something about using trees for fodder.
Oh, yeah. Fodder trees are great. Like subabul, it's a type of legume tree. They can plant them like around the edges of the fields, where they won't get in the way of the regular crops.
Okay.
The trees provide shade, which is good for the other plants. They help the soil, and of course, they're food for the animals.
It's really impressive how they're using everything they can. But what about those places that don't have much water? How can they grow fodder in dry areas?
That's a good question. Well, the article talks about some interesting research they're doing on unusual fodder.
What do you mean?
Like they're trying to use edible cactus as fodder.
Cactus for cows.
I know, it sounds weird, but cacti are really tough. They can handle those dry conditions. And they still have water and nutrients that the animals need.
So it's like a natural solution.
Right.
This is all very cool. We've got all these ways of growing fodder, even in difficult places. What about technology? Is there anything new coming up that could help?
Oh, for sure. Technology is changing everything, Like with precision agriculture, they can use sensors to monitor the crops and make sure they're getting exactly what they need.
So it's like using data to farm better.
Exactly. And then, scientists are developing new types of fodder crops that are more resistant to pests and diseases.
So it's like a constant improvement process.
Absolutely.
Sounds like the future of fodder production is going to be pretty high tech.
But even with all these cool solutions, there's still some pretty big challenges, right?
Scarce, yeah.
Like there's still the problem of land availability and climate change is a big one. It's definitely not easy. We need to figure out how to grow enough food for everyone while taking care of the environment.
Right.
It's a balancing act.
But it sounds like there's a lot of effort going into making fodder production more sustainable.
Definitely, yeah. And it's not just about the environment, it's also about supporting the farmers and the communities.
That's really important.
Absolutely. The article talks about how research and education are crucial for making things better.
So it's about giving farmers the knowledge and the tools to be successful.
Right. And the government needs to make policies that support them.
I agree.
And we also need to remember that farmers know a lot about the land.
They do.
They can help develop solutions that really work.
It's about everyone working together, sharing their knowledge, and finding new ways to do things.
Exactly. And the article actually mentions some institutions that are doing great work in this area.
Oh, like who?
Like the Agricultural Technology Application Research Institute in Kolkata. They're called ATARI. They're doing a lot of research on new fodder varieties, and then there's the National Dairy Development Board. They're doing training programs for farmers.
Sounds like a lot of people are involved in this.
It's a team effort for sure. And it's not just about finding one perfect solution. It's about trying different things and seeing what works best.
Right. It's about combining the best of the old ways with the new ideas.
Uh,
Before we wrap up, I'd love to hear more about the economic side of things.
sure. We touched on it before, but the article really emphasizes the potential of fodder production to boost the economy in eastern India.
Right. More fodder means more milk, which could mean more money for everyone.
Exactly, and more jobs too. But there are also some indirect economic benefits that we should talk about.
Oh, like what?
Well, if the animals are healthier, the farmers don't have to spend as much money on vet bills.
That's true.
And healthy animals produce more, so it's a win-win.
Yeah. Plus, sustainable farming practices can actually be good for the economy in the long run.
Absolutely. Things like improving the soil and protecting the environment, all have economic benefits down the road.
It's like a ripple effect.
Right.
But you mentioned earlier that there can also be some downsides to increasing livestock production, even if we do it sustainably.
Right. We can't ignore the impact of livestock on climate change, especially methane emissions.
Yeah, we were talking about how cows produce methane as part of their digestion, and methane is a very powerful greenhouse gas.
That's why it's so important to find ways to reduce those emissions.
Are there any solutions in the works?
Oh, yeah, there's lots of exciting research going on.
Okay, like what?
Well, one thing they're looking at is feed efficiency, which is basically making sure the cows are getting the most nutrition out of their food.
So if they're digesting their food better, they produce less methane.
Exactly. And they're also experimenting with special feed additives that can actually block methane production.
Wow, it's like a special supplement to make them more environmentally friendly.
It kind of is.
That's really cool. Anything else?
Oh, and some researchers are trying to breed cows that naturally produce less methane.
So it's a long-term solution, but it could be a game changer.
Right. It's pretty amazing what they're doing.
It's inspiring to see so much effort going into making livestock production more sustainable, both for the environment and the economy.
I agree. It's great to see.
It's a reminder that we need to use all the tools we have, from high-tech stuff to the old ways of doing things.
Yeah, we need everything.
Well, I think we've covered a lot in this deep dive, from the challenges to the solutions.
We have.
It's clear that fodder production is incredibly important, not just for India, but for the whole world.
Absolutely. And it's going to be fascinating to see how things develop in the future.
I can't wait to see what they come up with. It's been great talking about all this. Thanks for sharing your expertise. My pleasure. And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you learned something new, and we'll see you next time. Welcome back to the deep dive. We were talking about the economics of fodder production before. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. The article highlights how increasing fodder production can really benefit the local economy.
It makes sense. If farmers have more fodder, they can have more productive livestock, which means more milk and dairy.
Exactly. And that means more income for the farmers and more jobs for people in the dairy industry.
So everyone wins.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah. And there are also some indirect benefits, too.
What do you mean?
Well, think about it. When the livestock are healthier, the farmers don't have to spend as much on vet bills.
That makes sense.
And healthy animals produce more, milk or meat, so everyone benefits. Plus, we can't forget about the positive impact on the environment, which also has economic benefits in the long run.
Right, we talked about that earlier. Sustainable fodder production can improve soil health and even help with carbon storage. All of those things have positive economic impacts down the line.
Exactly. It all ties together.
But you mentioned earlier that there could be some downsides to increasing livestock production, even if we do it sustainably.
That's true. It's important to acknowledge that livestock, especially cows, contribute to greenhouse gas emissions, mainly methane.
Yeah, I remember. Cows produce methane during digestion, and methane is a pretty potent greenhouse gas, even more so than carbon dioxide.
That's why it's crucial to find ways to reduce those emissions. And the good news is there's a lot of promising research going on in that area.
Oh, that's good to hear. What are some of the things they're looking into?
Well, one strategy is to focus on feed efficiency, basically making sure the cows are getting the most nutrients out of the food they eat.
So if they digest their food better, they'll produce less methane.
Right. They're also experimenting with special feed additives that can actually reduce methane production in the cow's gut.
Wow, it's like giving them a supplement to make them more eco-friendly.
Kind of, yeah.
That's pretty amazing. Are there any other approaches?
Oh, yeah. There are researchers working on breeding cows that naturally produce less methane.
So a long-term solution, but it could have a big impact.
Definitely. It's pretty incredible what they're doing.
It's really inspiring to see how much effort is going into making livestock production more sustainable for the environment and for the economy.
I agree. It's a reminder that we need to use all the tools we have, from high-tech solutions to more traditional methods.
We need all the help we can get. Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from the challenges facing fodder production to the incredible solutions being explored. It's a really important topic.
It is, and I think it's going to become even more important in the future.
I agree. Thanks for being here and sharing your knowledge.
It was my pleasure.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you learned something new and interesting. We'll see you next time.